Sally YouTube, what is up? I hope that you guys are doing really well. This video is in response to a question that I have been getting a lot, ever since moving back to New Zealand, which is around the cost of living between France and New Zealand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the cost of living between Paris and Wellington, and you guys would be surprised. New Zealand is a very expensive country to live in, and I noticed that as soon as I moved back I was like, whoa. And so what I wanted to do is do a direct comparison about sort of my life expenses and costs and that kind of thing. Of course, it's almost impossible to compare the cost of living from one country to another because salaries may be different, taxes are different, all of this kind of stuff. So I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of context. So I do think that living in New Zealand, you generally have the same sort of capacity to earn what you would earn in France. However, if you're highly educated and you have your master's degree, like a lot of French people do, that's worth money in New Zealand. And in New Zealand, because the population's so small and because 14% of the country live overseas at any time, we're big travelers, we like to live abroad, there's a huge brain drain. So the country is only 4.5 million people and it's the size of the UK. So you've got very few people, and then those who are getting highly qualified tend to leave and move overseas to go traveling and work and that kind of stuff. What this means is that we've got huge skills shortages. So professions like engineers, doctors, IT, nurses, there's literally probably 100 professions on the list. So what this means is that if you are highly skilled, like Niels is, for example, he's an engineer, it's worth more. So he can earn, his potential to earn is a lot higher here in New Zealand than it was in France. So that's something to keep in mind. So even if the cost of living stays the same across the two countries, he's earning more money. And I think I personally would be able to earn slightly more money just because, employment rate's low, it's quite a dynamic job market, highly educated people are well sought after. You do tend to get paid a little bit more. In addition, you pay less social charges and less taxes here, which means that overall you do tend to, we have as a couple, a higher buying power in New Zealand than we did in France. However, I feel really sorry for people who are like working here minimum wage or like just in normal jobs, getting by, because it's freaking expensive to live in this country. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the direct comparison of what things cost, like rent, food, internet, that kind of thing, and then we can continue the conversation around what does this mean, because in France things like your healthcare is covered, which is incredible, which is huge, whereas in New Zealand you have to put money aside for that. So again, it's kind of like comparing apples with oranges, but we're going to do our best. So first things first, let's compare the rent. Now in Paris, we were in the 9th arrondissement, which is kind of like quite close to what's in the city. It's quite close to the city centre, maybe like a 15-20 minute bus ride. Really cool area, lots of bars, restaurants, a little bit dirty in some places. Like it's a little bit rough around the edges, but anyway, super cool place to be. We were paying 1,300 euros per month for our rent, or just over, like 1,321 to rent a 50 square metre apartment. Now, to take New Zealand, like something nice and close to the city, a cool 1-bedroom apartment, about 50 square meters and that kind of thing, you're looking at around $600 per week, which is $2,400 per month, which equals 1,384 euros in total. Rent in Wellington, like in general, is more expensive, I think, than in Paris, and that's probably why a lot of people actually house share and flat together. Now, in terms of electricity bills, in Paris it was 75 euros per month, whereas I find in New Zealand it's more around 86 euros per month, 90 euros per month. However, in general, people have homes rather than apartments to heat, and our electricity was actually included in our rent, so I find it hard to compare on this one. But I would say, yeah, electricity maybe it's slightly more expensive in New Zealand, or maybe around the same. Now, in terms of mobile phone, this is a big difference. For me personally, it was 13 euros per month to have unlimited calls, unlimited text, and basically unlimited data. Data, I don't know why I said it the American way, but you would reach like a few gigs and it would slow down or something, but in theory it was unlimited, right? To get the equivalent plan here of unlimited data in New Zealand, it's more around 40 euros per month. It's a lot more expensive. There's just not enough competition in the telco kind of space, and so New Zealanders really get screwed over in terms of phone and internet bills. Honestly, it's so expensive here. I'm personally on a mobile plan that suffices for me because I'm always connected to Wi-Fi, so I don't need a lot of data. So I think I get like 2 gigs per month or something, and I pay 10 euros per month plus unlimited calls and texts. But yeah, the cost of internet, again, it's the same kind of story, but it's double. So it was 25 euros per month in Paris, and it's 50 euros per month now for us here in New Zealand. Now food, I have noticed surprisingly that our food bill has gone down in terms of our general grocery shop. We'd spend around 110 euros per week in Paris, and per week in New Zealand we're spending about the equivalent of 80. However, we spend a lot more on lunches now in New Zealand, like eating out for lunch and stuff, because in France, and I'll link the video, but I've done a whole video on the corporate benefits and stuff, and one of the very common benefits is to have a staff canteen, and they give you these restaurant tickets where they pay for half of your meal. And so we would only spend like max 20-25 euros per week on lunches, and in New Zealand definitely spending more like 35 euros per week on lunches. Now in terms of transport, in Paris we had unlimited metro, buses, trams, even like all the way up to the airport and everything, for around 70 euros per month. And in New Zealand it is more expensive, so there's just, I guess, like less population, but like, so for the same infrastructure, you know, like it's just a higher price per person, I guess. So we would pay more like 80 euros per month, and that would just do the buses. If we wanted a train pass on top of that, we'd have to pay even more. So you start to see that it's actually more expensive. So anyways, I've done the comparison, and our basic fixed monthly costs in Paris were around 1,730 euros per month, and in New Zealand they are now around 1,805 euros per month. So it's actually officially more expensive to live in Wellington, New Zealand, than it is in Paris, which is kind of crazy. So as I said, like, we're fine, like, because we're in that high potential earning kind of slot, engineer, HR, and we're not like, you know, dentists and doctors and stuff like that either, but like, you know, we're fine. Like, we're earning more money here than we were in Paris, and everything kind of balances out. People living here, as I said, like on minimum wage or just doing normal jobs or traveling here and stuff, oh my gosh, must be such an expensive country to visit and live in when you're not like in that kind of privileged social strata, I guess, if you could call it that. And then overall I found that the cost to like go out, go to the cinema, go out for a nice meal, that kind of stuff, it's about the same. So where you lose out in New Zealand compared to France definitely would be around like private healthcare, like dentists and that kind of stuff. That's your responsibility. Whereas in France, yes, we paid a lot more charges and taxes, but it was kind of, you know, the healthcare was kind of absorbed, and we didn't have to think about it, and we didn't need to have the cash for that, so that was really cool. And then in New Zealand as well, I feel like we get really overcharged for like not just internet and phone, but anything to do with technology. And I guess, I don't know if it's because they have to pay high import taxes or something like that, but like anything that's like laptops, cameras and stuff like that, I find quite pricey. However, something that is a lot cheaper in New Zealand are imported secondhand cars for some reason. I guess they import a lot of them from Asia. It's not so far away, I guess, by boat relatively, kind of. Surprisingly as well, petrol is cheaper in New Zealand than in France. It's about 30 US cents less per litre in New Zealand than it is in France, and maybe that's something to do with the taxes. Now where you see a big difference, I think, is what we would have had to spend to buy a 45 square metre nice apartment in Paris. With that equivalent amount of money, we've just bought a 3-bedroom house with a section, outdoor area, like in a really nice neighborhood, like a 10-12 minute drive to the city center, really good location. So that's where you see a big difference, I think, when you're buying a house. Yes, the property in New Zealand is incredibly expensive, but it is in Paris too, and you still get more for your money in New Zealand than you do in Paris. Also, when you buy an apartment in Paris, you have these frais notaires, which are the fees of the notary. They cost you 8% of the house purchase price. It's absolutely insane. So if you're going to spend 400,000 euros on a 1-bedroom apartment, which is completely normal to do in Paris, you'll pay like $37,000 just on admin fees, basically these notary fees, which protect the sale or something like this. Now to buy our house in New Zealand, it cost us, wait for it, negative $1,000, because we do all of that stuff via a lawyer. The lawyer cost around 2,000 New Zealand dollars. We got a builder's report to check that it was sound. We got reports from the council. We did all of this kind of stuff, and it cost around $3,000, I guess, if you add everything up to purchase the property. But then the bank, because we signed up with them, and all of the banks do this, they give you like a cash bonus for buying a house and this kind of stuff, and they reimbursed us like $1,000 more than it cost us to buy the house. Now, if you're looking at interest rates though, we've got much higher interest rates. We're around 3.7% in New Zealand, whereas in France they can be down at like 1.5, 2% in terms of interest you're paying on your mortgage. However, we get more interest on our savings accounts. So as you guys are beginning to see, I think it's a really difficult comparison game, because each system is so different, and some expenses that you have in some countries you don't have in the other. And I actually did a whole video on the things, for example, that you just don't buy anymore when you live in France, which I'm going to link up here and also leave down below in the description box, because I think it gives you a good idea of how you can be in a different country and your spending habits completely change. If you have any questions about what's it like living in New Zealand, or New Zealand versus France, or Wellington versus Paris, in any respect whatsoever, please let me know down below. I can either respond to you directly, or I will keep it as an idea to use in a future video. But anyways, that's all for this week, and I will see you guys next time on the Not Even French channel. A bientôt! Say a bientôt!